What do you think of people using the phrase "going viral" these days? Is it in bad taste? What do you think?
It's just an irony. I just say, ironic or weird.
I was reading a Twitter poll earlier. They were asking, when you see that so and so, some famous person has died, what is your first thought? Coronavirus.
No, no, it's not. No, I mean, it depends.
I think it is for me. I don't think it's likely. My first question is,
I still think it's heroin.
Heroin, yeah. Different times, I suppose.
Right. I mean, they're still doing drugs, right? And it seems like, especially if they're not, 96 at the end of their career or something like that, and they're 45, and car accident or heroin.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I mean, that's probably macabre, but I mean, drug overdoses are a huge loss of Hollywood stars, right?
That's true. That or like suicide or something like that.
Yeah, right. Robin Williams, right. But I think all that's connected to drug use and stuff. I mean, he was underlying depression. Why are you using drugs? A lot of times it's underlying depression.
Maybe. I don't know if everybody who does drugs has underlying depression. Or maybe we just all have underlying depression and we all do drugs or something like that.
Well, I mean, it's escapism. Isn't the opioid crisis like all these people just want to like escape life?
Sure. I mean, is it a chicken egg sort of scenario, Like which one's causing which? Maybe it's both.
Yeah. But so, I don't know. I still think that's what I think. I don't know. I really don't think coronavirus. In fact, especially with younger people, it almost feels like, that probably isn't gonna.
Sure. I guess for me, the distinction will be if I recognize the name of the person, not coronavirus. Right. If I don't recognize them, it's probably someone older, and there probably is.
I don't know. It's weird. When I hear about a death in China, I almost always don't think coronavirus. I think execution. Seriously, I mean, there's two of the doctors that initially found this that were talking on their WeChat in a closed group,
right?
And 2 of the 8 are dead of coronavirus. Maybe I've got a tinfoil hat,
sure.
But I'm a little skeptical.
You're a little suspicious that 2 of the 8 died of the virus?
Yes. Okay. And one of them is 33 years old.
That did seem a little weird.
No underlying health factors. I mean, again, maybe.
Yeah, I did think that was kind of striking was that, I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago. It was probably just a couple of weeks. But like when it came out that first guy, the kind of whistleblower who got a lot of flack from the Chinese government, that he died from it, I was kind of shocked. I was like, from what I heard, it didn't seem like this was affecting people his age or his category like this hard. And even if you should be exposed to it like as much as he was, it really shouldn't change much other than just being exposed to it normally. That's my perspective. I don't work in the medical field.
You can. I mean, he should have been able. I mean, he falls in the very low, like 0.1% chance of dying from this. It's exceedingly low. It might even be lower than that. I don't know. It's just weird. And then his 57-year-old ophthalmologist partner also dies. Again, don't know if they have underlying conditions. They could be smokers.
Right.
That hurts. But both of them were not obese. So they didn't have that risk factor. It's just I don't trust what's coming out of China. So color me weird.
The more numbers, the more, I guess, infected numbers, hospitalization numbers, intensive care unit and death numbers we all see from across the globe, the more crazy China's initial numbers look. Have you seen those like in retrospect now? It's nuts. There's no way. There's just absolutely no way.
It's so stupid. Like if you're going to fudge the numbers, make them at least look close.
Like, do you remember like when we got the numbers from China, it was like, oh my God, it's bad. Look how bad it is in China. And it must have been so much worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense why they wouldn't tell anyone. If it was at the scale it is there with like their less preparedness for it.
It's also true. I mean, this thing has mutated, and generally these things mutate downwards, so to less virility. The virulence is the word I'm looking for.
Right.
So the idea is that the virus, all it really cares about is propagating the most, and if it's killing too many people too quickly, then it actually hurts itself. So they tend to mutate to less virulence, so they can have maximum effectiveness. So it's possible we're seeing some of that. It is possible that China got ravaged in a brutal way right on. I mean, in the Wuhan the urns, they were giving out 3,500 urns per day. I guess so. You didn't give out 65,000 urns because they did that for 12 straight days. And so what's that? 40,000 urns right there. I mean that you're limited.
That's just in Wuhan, you said.
Yeah, we're going to limit our urns to 3,500 a day. To come pick up your. That's insane.
What are we at? Do you know?
12,000.
The only ones that per day?
Not per day.
Oh, okay.
That's a total number. That's not a per day number.
37,000 deaths in America.
Oh, is it? Wow. It's 37,000?
13,000 just in New York City.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then that's the number.
That's the one we always see with Governor Cuomo with his like chart there every morning.
That's right.
They've been doing a good job though. That's been like reassuring to see. Like I think they actually had negative growth for the first time, just like Thursday or Friday.
That's right. And they're the state that's most hardest hit, and they're still not overwhelming their own healthcare system. So that's good.
Luckily, yeah. Did you see I saw the video or a picture. I think it was a video whenever the ship's name is, I don't remember what the name is. Whenever the like Navy ship that came in to act as like a floating hospital came in, there was like a giant crowd of people just sitting there watching it and filming it, not social distancing, just sitting there like getting their Instagram pictures for their. Yeah,
it was. I can't remember. You're right. The USS like health or
yeah,
something like that.
And everybody was just out there filming and like, oh my god. It's just
right, and then Trump went off to like send it off from Virginia.
Right. Oh yeah, our commander in chief.
Yeah. So he was. They asked him if he was only in the White House, and then he said, "Well, but I did go to Virginia to have the ship sent off."
What a hero.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess that's what you do. I mean, it is traditional to do that. It's just everything that's traditional is no longer there, right? It's traditional to have a first baseball game on around April 1st, and the president throws out the first pitch, and we're not doing that because we're not doing any baseball. We're not doing any sports of any kind. So nothing is traditional anymore. It's traditional to have parties for people that retire. I saw one piece on TV where some fire chief, 60-some years, was going to retire, and they he's at his door, and everyone's out in the yard 6 feet apart in masks, and he's like, well, thank you, this is great, hopefully more people don't have to have this kind of celebration. It sucks.
It does suck. I also saw something on the other side of that where everybody who has their wedding coming up is saving so much money.
Jesus Christ. I mean, but that, again, how much would that suck?
No obligations to invite your family.
Right, but what do? Do you get mass? I mean, but the whole point is to have this big party. I mean, think of the women that have been planning this, especially the wives that really, really get into this, right?
Sure.
I mean, husbands can too, right? But I mean, let's be fair. It's supposed to be the bride's day, and like all of this, and you've been planning this sometimes maybe for a year and a half. Like say you had some special church or something like at Notre Dame, the Sacred Heart Basilica is rented out for like 4 years in advance.
I'm not so sure anymore since it burned down.
What's that?
Did Notre Dame burn down?
I'm talking about Notre Dame, Indiana.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I'm sorry.
You're talking about Notre Dame, right?
I forget.
I'm talking about Notre Dame, Indiana. So there's a basilica there called Sacred Heart. It's a church, and it's gorgeous. And there's a huge waiting list to get married there.
Sure.
Right. But imagine you did, and now you can't have your party. You've waited that long.
Obviously, they're paying the churches to rent it out. Do the churches do they use something with the revenue stream there? Are they going to be are churches going to be going under? Are churches going to be going bankrupt? I mean, the Catholic Church isn't, of course. But.
No, I mean, right. But they're going to take a big hit to the revenue stream, right? So, yeah, they're going to have to dig into the coffers.
It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean,
church revenue
when that's an endowment, right? Say, if you want to continue paying your people and you have X endowment, you're going to have to dig into the endowment.
Right.
Which means you can't run off the interest anymore, which is what your operating budget usually is. And that's the way these big things work. Like Harvard's got a big endowment.
Right.
The Catholic Church's got a huge endowment. So you're just going to have to start digging into that.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Let's hop into this so I actually have something to say on Harvard. So I guess I'm not sure we're going to start here, but based on I think we already started. I'll cut out some parts of this, but based on the frequency of kind of the podcast we're doing here. So we have the CoronaCast here, obviously. Yeah. And I'm thinking with kind of our timing of recording frequency and my ability to get things out, I'm hoping that this will be the only opportunity we actually get to do a CoronaCast. Okay. Because hopefully by the time I actually get this one out in, maybe a month and a half, things will be not so much present. Maybe we can do like a retrospective hindsight 2020 sort of one. But,
yeah, sure.
But I don't know. It's interesting. I saw that part of the kind of thing that everybody's done, everybody's in quarantine right now. Everybody's trying to find something to occupy their time. One of the big things was like podcasting equipment. It's just gone. You can't buy it anywhere online because everybody's just like starting their own podcast now. So, I mean, everybody's got all this time on their hands and getting their government UBI checks in. So this is the future this is the future that Andrew Yang wanted, I'm sure.
Right. Clippers are I heard there was a run on hair clippers too.
I saw you got a haircut.
Yeah, I did. I have clippers.
Oh, did you do it yourself?
No. But,
all right, gotcha.
So
how'd it go?
I don't know. How'd it go? It's a little short on top, but
Looks fine.
I've got the mullet, except for without the long hair in the back.
Just the part.
2080, I just have the 20.
Just the business everywhere.
Right.
I
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, the rounded burr is coming back. I brought it back from the 1950s. What do you like? I mean, you've got a mop, dude.
Yeah, I think
A mop.
I'm shooting to not cut my hair for a full year just to see what happens to happening. I think I'm at 8 months right now. So
Jesus over here. Holy shit.
I'm one of my hobbies I've picked up here is I've started rock climbing. So it's
really?
I think kind of fits my aesthetic if I'm like rock climbing more. And I have like all this long hair.
Don't let your hair get caught in a cranny of like Jesus
Well,
Christ.
what if it saves me?
It could scalp you too. Right. I mean, like you got to look on stop looking at the bright side. I mean, start look at only catastrophe.
Right. It's like 127 hours. Instead of my arm caught, it's just my hair.
Yeah.
I have to sit there for 3 days debating whether or not to cut my hair.
Right. And then we'll entitle that Vanity.
What matters more, my hair or my life? It's a hard one. I'll have to think about that one.
Vanity and the Rock Climber. It's like a children's book. Learn a lesson from this, kids. Please don't do this.
How have you been holding up though? What have you been doing to keep sane here and like all your time
That's
just kind of
what we've
yourself?
been doing. Like we've had Sean's coming over here like every day, and we just like work up podcasts. So we did one on the Wisconsin State Senate. Was contacted by the Communist Party of China. And
I did see that.
They asked them, will you please pass this resolution? And the resolution is redonk. And it's just all about, China's so awesome, this and that. And then they contact like Roger Roth, the Senate president, Republican Appleton. And I thought, okay, contact a Democrat. Jesus, you dumbass. Don't contact the Republican. I mean, he's going to eat your lunch. And,
you think so?
I mean,
I think the reason if I had to guess, I think the reason they're contacting the Republican Party is because they had this working relationship with Scott Walker about like Foxconn. I imagine that's why they're contacting Wisconsin specifically. So they're trying to kind of rely on that because the Democratic Party is not going to be a fan of the Foxconn stuff.
Well, okay, that may be true, but the way I understood it was so there's a consul general like liaison for all the big cities, right? And the consulate person, the Chinese party communist relations guy with I can't remember his name, with Chicago. His wife, he tasked his own wife with Wisconsin. So so we're kind of like the redheaded stepchild. He's like, okay, I've got Chicago. That's the important thing. But you're not doing anything, honey. Why don't you do Wisconsin? And she's like, all right. And like a good little sales rep, she just like, well, let's see what I can do. Let's contact the Senate.
Fair enough.
And it was weird because it's just weird of how they talk. And it was fun. And when I first read it, I thought, okay, this person doesn't speak English well. But then I had to take it back because when I read some of these other resolutions from the Senate, they're all worded in this weird, terrible way. So I thought, okay, no, actually she's smart. She actually does know this kind of thing. But it was weird how it was all praise on China. There wasn't anything much about Wisconsin. You would think that you should mix your propaganda with "we're great, but you're great, we're friends." And that was one of my critiques of it is that if you're going to do this kind of thing, you got to at least say that Wisconsin's awesome.
I mean, especially kind of in the wake of the whole, I guess the last news cycle here was about, President Trump versus the states on who gets to open up the economy. And it's been interesting seeing the states kind of, at least I think it's interesting, is that the states have kind of coalesced together, that they formed their own blocks. They've formed their own kind of contingencies. So
they have?
Yeah. Really? There's like the New England areas all kind of like formed a group that is going to be like, we're all working together to decide when it's the right time to open up our region. And there was a Midwest one that got in place too. I don't remember the exact states, but I think it was like Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. I think they're all kind of...
you're creating your own game of Risk.
Exactly.
Right? Like the Northeastern Triumvirate, the Midwest, Great Lakes block.
Right. I mean, that's what I've been advocating for a long time now. Is I think we need to split up into smaller subgroups and kind of govern ourselves internally here. But I think it's.
But then what does Hawaii get? Do they just get independence then?
Hawaii can be part of California.
Guam? Like poor Guam, they're fucked on their own.
All the Pacific Coast states and all the Pacific Coast territories can band together.
So Alaska and Hawaii in the same
and Guam and the Virgin Islands are out there.
The Virgin Islands on the other side though. They're in the Atlantic.
I didn't know that.
Pretty sure.
But you got California, Washington, Oregon,
the Solomon Islands,
all the Pacific Ocean bordering.
Okay. All right.
But no, with China contacting specific states, I think it kind of speaks to how other countries perceive the United States, how we see ourselves as being just, part of the United States, but other countries might see us more as being separate kind of entities like the EU, how all these different countries are part of the EU. They might see us more as being all these different like big capital S states being part of the United States, which I think is ideally what was originally intended, but not really in practice what takes place anymore here.
Yeah, I wonder if the average person from Egypt, though, or these other places are able to truly understand the differences between, New York and California. I mean,
what do you mean?
Without that much, that you're an American, that they would look at you as an American, not so much as a Californian or a New Yorker. Your average person, you're an American versus a Canadian, and
I suppose so. Do you think that has more to do with the size of the countries, though? I mean, if you look at the size of the countries, I'm sure people in Egypt would say they're very different people in Iran, even though those are much closer than, New York and California.
But I'm sure there's a huge difference between like the culture in Perth, Australia on the west and Sydney on the east. I mean, that's a big country. I'm sure that there's, but I don't think I can truly be able to appreciate that. Whereas I should be immediately be able to tell a New Yorker from a Californian or.
You think so? Just by the way they look?
Just by the way they talk. I mean, come on. I mean, if they're all traditional.
Sure.
So if they're all traditional, I should be able to pick it.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be able to do that with a lot of other countries. Even in Britain, can I remember the Liverpool accent versus the London? Maybe not. I'd probably get it confused.
That's the crazy one to me is when you see. I think I was reading something saying there's just so many different regional accents and regional variations in like England, and it's such a small place compared to like everything
it's so
else.
small, exactly. And I'd screw it up, and I feel like I'm somewhat worldly, and I don't know, maybe I'm not, but I think I would screw it up. I'd know the difference. I could hear the difference, but I wouldn't be able to be like, yep, London, yep, Liverpool. But I guarantee that my Brit friends would laugh at me. Of course, they would be able to do it. So that's what I mean. So maybe, I mean, you would know if your business is in California, but I don't know culturally. Hell, I mean, French is the French culture and say, I don't know, Bordeaux different than in Paris? Maybe. I don't fucking know. I really don't know. I just haven't been there. I was just listening to this general the other day. It was, just fantastic. He was talking about China. He was talking about the difference between like the culture in Shanghai and Beijing. It's different, like than the capital city. It is a little bit different. There's a bit more deferred. It's more laid back, and it's just not as wild.
In Shanghai, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But it was, and then he was also talking about the difference, like culturally too, between like in the early 2000s and then now. He said when he was there from 2002 to 2004, he never saw anyone with a gun. Now you go there and you see people at the airport, the officials toting guns.
Is that like in the wake of the coronavirus or just in general?
He was just saying in general. It's just a little bit more militant there now. He said the culture is different. He said in 2000, when they became, I think right around the early 2000s, they became part of the World Trade Organization. So they didn't have to have like a vote on most favored nation status every single year. Once they became involved in there, the trade, everything started booming, and everybody and their brother was creating business in China, not just us, but like the Chinese. And he was actually part of the American military living over there, and nobody really cared because all they were concerned about is growth. And now I think they're concerned about being a leader on the world stage, so it's different.
Right. They need to project the image that they want other countries to see them as a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Before they were kind of like the young teenager. Now I think they're acting like maybe the 38-year-old, 40-year-old that wants to be the boss.
The gun-toting 38 to 40-year-old.
Maybe. I don't know if they're gun-toting or just like, look, this is my company now.
Sure. Something that, an impact that I've seen here is that China's done a lot of investment into Indian Ocean kind of bordering countries like African countries, Southeast Asian countries like that. And I think it could be a matter of them. A lot of these countries aren't quite as developed as other countries. So China almost wants to instill a sense of like protection in them, like work with us and we have the power to protect you in a certain way, which I think may be part of that image as well. Something I was seeing though is that because, what they've been doing, from my understanding, this is kind of a loose understanding, is that they'd go to like African country on the Indian Ocean and say, hey, we'll build a port here, we'll help you fund it and all that sort of stuff, but you'll owe us kind of in the long run, and we're going to be the ones who are going to owe this port. Now, these countries are on the most emerging side of the emerging markets, and this is hitting them probably the worst that you could possibly get hit, because if you have like just a little bit and then that little bit gets taken away, you're back to zero. So all these countries are starting to default to China on their debts. So it's going to be interesting to see what China does in response to that. I doubt they'll do anything, because what are they going to do?
Well, I think what China has done, and this is, it's weird. So if you default, let's say you're a Chinese citizen and I own your mortgage.
You as an American, or
no, we're both Chinese.
Okay.
Like, I just tack what you owe on the end of the mortgage. I don't actually come and foreclose on your property. It's really weird in China how they do things. The money there, it's not trusted like it is here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're completely dependent on our economic system. So they're doing the same thing with these other folks. As yep, they're behind on their debts. They owe China this and that. They can't pay, and they're like, don't worry. You know, we'll just tack it on. You know, we'll give you plenty of extra time to pay. You know, don't worry about it. But you know, by the way, couldn't we build a base here? You know, on this island that you're not using? And then they're like, you know, otherwise, you know, we don't want to have to foreclose, but we're going to be really liberal. We're going to be really nice with that. Yeah, of course. You know, if I can get, you know, instead of net 30, I can get net 300. Well, heck, you know, I don't have the money. It sounds good. We're not using that island anyways.
Sure.
I don't care. You know, and like these guys are going to be nice to us. So I think, yeah, that's helpful. The other thing is, what about states like Venezuela, right? You know, you've got a pretty brutal dictator in there, right? We don't recognize Maduro. We recognize, what's his name? Juan Guaido. So are we going to give Maduro, say, $50 million to combat Corona? Kidding me? They're not going to do that. They're going to be like, you know, that guy's just going to pocket it, at least as far as we're concerned. But then he actually does need help. So what, you know, the only one to, you know, you're going to have shady characters fill in the gaps there. Of course, they're going to look to Iran, China, Russia.
Right. Anyone who's willing to help them.
Yes, absolutely.
It makes sense.
So that's how they get in league. And that's one of the problems with having, you know, a guy like Maduro there, is now we can't really help him.
Well, that's the whole thing was Maduro. He's been in power for a while, hasn't he? Yeah, his was the whole regime that kind of over leveraged their oil industry. And then,
ruined it.
I mean, have you seen what the oil prices have been doing the last like month or so here?
I know that's dollars.
It's been crazy. Yeah, I mean,
you got to go back to the 90s. Well, to see that,
and it's a separate reason from like the coronavirus too. Like, so like the coronavirus, obviously people are traveling less, so demand is down and causing prices to go down. But then OPEC and Russia got into a huge disagreement. I don't know if you saw this, but where they were like, Saudi Arabia being the de facto leader of OPEC was like, hey, don't pump as much because we want to like kind of cut down. And Russia was like, no, we'll just keep doing what we want to do. And in response, instead of immediately going to try to like, you know, hash things out and have a debate about what they can do and figure things out, Saudi Arabia was like, oh, okay, then we'll just pump as much as we can too. And I think they were actually looking at the numbers, and Saudi Arabia was pumping at full capacity and also pulling stuff out of like inventory and dumping it onto the market.
Oh, wow.
Which it did a couple of things here. It obviously drew prices down. I think there was at the pump in Wisconsin, there was certain places where it was under $1 per gallon.
Wow.
And it's
I did not see that.
Yeah. And it's also Russia. The original thought was that Russia maybe is like trying to get this to happen because they're trying to put the U.S. shale business out of the market, because the U.S. shale business is, their margins are very thin. So if prices go down like they have been, the U.S. shale business is no longer profitable.
I think that was the plan, right? Wasn't their plan to do something like that?
I mean, that was what people were saying, but I mean, it's not like...
Oh, that was speculation.
I think it's speculation because, I mean, if you think it'll knock them out of business, sure, but then once prices go back up, they could just go back into business. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's friction costs, there's opportunity costs there for sure, but it's not like once the shale patches shut down, that it's shut down for good.
And shale patches, is that fracking?
I think it's fracking. I actually don't know too much about oil.
Everything, right? You can frack oil, you can frack natural gas.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure what fracking is. It's just a different way of mining, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess I think it's pockets of like natural gas and oil, and then you do a mixture of like, you shoot water to break open like rocks, and then you suck I mean, it's a complicated process, and I think the issue is that it leads to like a lot of sinkholes in like natural formations, which is why people don't like it so much.
You can scoop things in the water supply.
Yeah, when you're pumping, you're just kind of like taking the like liquid out of the ground.
Yeah.
When you're fracking, you're like destroying the ground underneath the surface. So it's a little more destructive, but it's pretty efficient from, I guess, what I think, from what I under here. But Yeah, so the oil industry has been going through all this turmoil here, and because we've run into this issue where there's no place left to store all the oil because the demand's so low and there's been such a glut on the market that there's been cases where people who produce oil are literally paying people to, like, small amounts, but instead of usually the company who's looking to buy the oil takes it and pays for it, the company producing it has been paying a small amount for them to just take it away and go store it somewhere, just because they have so much and they're just running, like, they're losing more money than that just by having so much.
They have to rent a some land to store all this stuff at.
Right. Or what I've seen is some companies are renting like shipping ships like on the ocean, filling them with oil and just like sending them out to sea because they have nowhere else to store it.
Wow. Okay.
It's wild. It's been pretty crazy for the oil market.
What do these boats just sit out there?
In theory, they're like, here, go to this country and we'll work out a deal like on the time, like in the time that it takes you to get there or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So it's been quite the turmoil for the oil industry. I think so there's a certain kind of investment called like a master limited partnership, and it gives like a lot of oil exposure because you kind of like, the way it's set up is it's very complicated, but you own part of the oil like business. So you get paid like income streams and revenue streams from the business. And going into the year, they were at an all-time high, and it was all-time high, but they were earning like 7-8% annualized over the last 10 years or so. I think this year to date, even with the bounce back we've had, they're down like 50%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just crushed. So been a little bit of interesting thing there. And I think it was just such a weird time for like Russia to die on this hill when the whole coronavirus thing was happening. I'm not sure if that's the kind of like, what makes me think that maybe they were trying to do something to the U.S. industry, because it wouldn't make sense to do it any other way unless who knows what Russia's thinking. Maybe they're just trying to find a hill to die on and prove that they're willing to, stick their flag in the ground and then defend it to the last.
I don't know. It's just weird. I mean, it's interesting that they tried to do that. I don't know. I guess it's good for us. It's good for the consumer. I don't know. It's nice for the consumer.
Yeah, that's
gas
true.
That low.
It is nice, especially with everything else being so bad. I guess being the main part of what we're going to do here today, though, I was thinking of you're a little more exposed to the medical side of things. I'm a little more exposed to the economics and financial side of things. So these are the two big topics these days, it seems like. Maybe I'm just too close to notice any other ones. But because we don't really know too much about each other's side of things, I figured that we can kind of take the layman's approach, and I can ask you questions about the medical side of things. You can ask me general questions about the economic side of things.
Well, they're tied together too.
Right, yeah. And hopefully those questions will kind of line up with the general questions people have, and we can kind of provide some insight there. So I can start off here.
Yeah, sure.
Big question I have, and kind of one that I have an argument most with like my family members, isn't this just like the flu?
Right. Well, no, it's not. I mean, in so much that it looks to be 3 to 4 times more virulent than the flu. And way more contagious, like 6 times more contagious.
The R naught factor.
Yeah, the R naught is in the 5s. I thought it was going to be in the 3s.
Really?
It's in the 5s. So it's extremely contagious. There's some data that came out from the Netherlands that 3% of the people in the Netherlands had antibodies to this. 3%. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot, right? Considering that they were reporting like how many thousand cases? Like 18,000 cases. But with the population of X million, there's 10 times more that they're missing. So the amount of people that, when 3% have antibodies, and that comports to be like 300,000 to 400,000 people, but you only have, say, 15,000 cases, your denominator number is massive. So this brings down the virulence number. So and it also proves how unbelievably contagious this is.
To have antibodies, do you need to have had it beforehand, or there's some people who have natural immunity to do it?
You got exposed. So it means you contracted it. It doesn't mean you got sick. It just means that your immune system figured this out and created an antibody to it and shut it down. So you could have been asymptomatic and have an antibody. You could have been very sick and had an antibody. But your immune system was just had it. And there's a certain natural immunity that some people have too.
Right. I mean,
right. So you could have just been naturally immune. This tried to get you, and your body just said, yeah. And, you had it.
Something I've seen
isn't it just the flu?
Right. Well, that's kind of going out the same point, is that with people saying, it's just the flu there, the flu is deadly. The flu kills people every year. At what point would we need the coronavirus to be, I guess, is there a specific point we're looking to get it down to that it's going to kill people still, but we can, function the same way with the flu normally. Or I guess kind of how do those two relate? Is it something we can like work down towards, or is the coronavirus different altogether from the flu that it'll never be really something we can just kind of live with? It'll just be either everything or nothing.
Well, see, the flu is the reason why they were worried about all this is even if this was the flu or the flu times 3, right? Well, then, okay, it's a new disease, but you're worried about it overwhelming the system because flu, car accidents, cancer, all of this stuff is baked into the cake. We already know this. This has been with us forever. So we have the amount of medical resources to deal with all these things. When you add in something completely new, totally novel, you don't have it. And like most businesses do this. I mean, if you have an office building, right, you want to have your capacity 90 to 95%, 100% full, right? Or maybe you'd never ever want to have like half of your factory empty because otherwise you're paying all this rent on space you don't need, right? You want to have a building that's good. So same way with healthcare, you don't have an 800 bed hospital where it's usually 400 beds are full. Beds in a hospital are almost all full. You have maybe a 10 to 15% extra. So, you go to any random ICU that has 24 beds, at any time, 20 are full. Like only 4 exist that are open. So this is not baked into the cake. So what we need to do in order to live with this, we can live with this if we know exactly how much we're going to need medical wise, which is still, we don't really know, right? Because everything's changing. This, different strains could be more virulent, less virulent. Once we figure all this out, you can increase medical capacity. And now it's baked into the cake. And now it's just a thing, right? Again, cancer sucks. Cancer kills people.
Right.
Flu sucks. The flu kills people, but it's baked into the cake. All you can hope for from the medical system is to give you a fighting chance. That's all you can hope for. I mean, you get into a terrible car wreck. All you can hope for is that there's a bed available, that you can get the treatment, and then sometimes they have to pull the plug, but then sometimes they bring you back.
So you think that the whole quarantine, the whole social distancing measures, is that more to put an ease on the logistics of hospitals?
Yes. The whole idea was to flatten the curve.
Right.
Yeah. That was the only. And right now we haven't. It hasn't spiked. We have flattened the curve. Even in New York, has not been overwhelmed. And Cuomo came out and said, nope, there wasn't one patient that needed a ventilator that didn't get it. This was not the case in Italy. In Italy,
right, they
had to, quote unquote, play God. If
the death panels.
Yeah. And they had to say, all right, this person doesn't have much of a chance. We're going to pull their ventilator and give it to someone else that has, they thought, a better chance. That's tough. Mm-hmm. You're not giving that person a fighting chance. This isn't like you had a brain dead patient and the family comes and said, yep, it's time. We're going to pull life-saving treatment. We're deciding for you. Sorry.
Right. I was reading something where they were interviewing some Italian doctor. They were saying that, in medical school, they have these ethics courses. We go through these scenarios of what would happen. What would you do in this case? And it's kind of brushed off as being just something you have to keep in mind. But they never actually really thought that they would be using those courses, actually having that sort of experience as a doctor.
What do they say to them? I mean, how do you have this ethics course, right? Do you do math? You can probably reasonably determine who's got a better chance.
Right.
I've never seen one of these courses. What are they like?
I mean, I took philosophy in college and a little bit of exposure to it. And it's not so much of saying what's the correct answer here? It's just kind of putting you in a scenario and saying, what would you do here? Why would you do it? Just so it's less of preparation for making the right choice. It's more of a preparation for you to be able to make a choice and then live with it, I think.
Did they say, if you write a thing, well, excuse me, let me get out my calculator. Do you fail?
you pull out your calculator, start calculating the utils of having this person's 5 versus
this person gets a 79.2 and this guy's got a 78.3. So we know who gets what.
Have a probability weighted forward value of their future contributions to society.
Oh my God, this sounds terrible.
It's the way life is.
Oh man, yeah. I don't know. These are tough decisions. I don't know how they make them. I wouldn't want to be over there in Italy making those decisions. Now here they were splitting ventilators. You can do that. But then you have to respirate them. They're the same. I feel like either Italy has gotten a little bit more virulent strain, or that they're not as healthy. One of the two, because
and they have a pretty old population too.
Yeah, that they're right. That their health thing is is lower because we're doing way better than they are. And then part of it, maybe I'm biased, but like it's just American ingenuity. I feel like we're just better.
I'd wager their population density is quite a bit higher than ours too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that are going there, but it's just, and they got overwhelmed mostly in the north. They didn't really in the south. So again,
Right.
they have their Milan is New York, right?
Yeah, where their dense populations are in the north. North is all industrial. That's where all the surfaces are. That's where all the industry is. In the south, it's just farms. I mean, it's kind of like Wisconsin in a way where you have the big outbreaks in. Really, it's just really just Milwaukee.
Yeah.
There's a bit in Madison, but it's almost, if I had to guess, it's probably 80% Milwaukee, 5% Madison. Everything else is just spread across the
We're
state.
all spread out. I know people like, in New York, there would never be as much distance as there is from me and my neighbor, right? That would be unheard of. Like that's
Right.
a ton of wasted space.
Well, it's like even in Milwaukee where it's relatively more dense, we don't really, I think the big thing is we don't have a lot of shared surfaces that we all
Right.
touch. It's typically you're in your car, you're out in this, I mean, you maybe touch things in like a grocery
the
store.
subway is a huge part. And then
Right.
and then also New York, what about the elevator? I mean, everything's high rises there. Everyone's switching the damn elevator here. But if you have these 2-story things here, there's no need for an elevator. The only time I ever use an elevator here is in the hospitals. Think about
Right.
it. I use an elevator. The only time is when I'm in the hospitals.
Right.
It's the only time I can really think of it. I haven't been. Well, I mean, I guess if I go to Blue, right, which is like the Pfister Hotel, you go to the top and it's got a good view. But I haven't been to Blue in forever.
Right.
So, and
No.
I don't. There's no public transport. I mean, we have public transportation, but I haven't
have to
ridden
hop.
it. Right. I mean, I rode public transportation in Chicago and in New York, but I've never taken it almost anywhere else.
Sure.
Never here.
Yeah, I think it has to do with we're still relatively dense for Wisconsin, but compared to these other cities, like, I mean, we're still pretty spread apart here.
Yeah. I think our risk factors are lower. Although obesity is a huge one. Obesity is a big risk factor.
What do you think of people looking to protest the government keeping the states closed? I mean, and I guess we'll see when this
Michigan,
comes
right?
out. In Wisconsin, so
Was there in Wisconsin? I know
there's-
Michigan.
It hasn't had one yet, but I guess this will kind of date this podcast if I'll kind of hold my feet to the fire here. But I think next weekend here on the 24th, next Friday, the 24th,
You supposed to be one?
there's going to be a protest outside the state capitol to get Governor Tony Evers to open the state back up for business.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Well, I know that like there was a funny thing in the Babylon Bee. Did you see that article that said like Xi
No.
Jinping impressed with authoritarianism?
I did see it just
governor?
now, actually.
It's just awesome, right? And like so the Michigan governor, she's done like a lot of kind of nutty things to like pull people. We're going to arrest you and this and that. So I think part of that rhetoric, there's a lot of these, this is that American fire breathing, like, yeah, F you. We're gonna do what we want. No, that protest, to be fair, was supposed to be in their cars. So everyone was supposed to go up and traffic jam the place in their cars, hold up a sign. So you're supposed to be a socially distant protest. But then, of course, when you get a group that big, you can't control it. You're talking to people that you don't know. These aren't your friends. These aren't always your buddies. They're strangers. So some of these people have an idea, yeah, we're going to take it because, they're going to take part in this. And they're like, yeah, but we ain't going to stay in our cars. And then what's the leader supposed to do? Right. They can't control these people.
Right.
They don't know them, so I think that, they hurt themselves actually then by some of those people doing it. Because if they would have done the socially distant protest, then it would have been like, look, clearly we respect, that we don't want to get people sick,
Right.
but we really disagree with this. And really, I think that would have been the most powerful.
It's like we get it, but we are stating our opinion that we disagree. I guess with the way it stands,
Yeah, what if they would have just gone in all honk their horns? Imagine the cacophony, right, of what that would have sounded like,
Oh my God.
But yet you're all still socially distant.
Have you seen that picture? I think it was from somewhere in South Dakota or something with the protesters outside the door, like banging on the door. There's like someone in like a Trump hat. There's like this lady like banging on, trying to hold up a sign. There's someone in, like an anonymous
Where was
mask
this?
behind it. I think it's like South Dakota.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it was just like, it's like, oh my God, you people, you people, I don't know, do you see where they're coming from as being relatable? Do you understand it? Or do you think they're just being naive and not really understanding the gravity of the situation?
Well, I think that...
Are they justified, I guess is what I'm asking.
It's hard. Their emotions are justified, yes,
Okay.
right? So there's a difference. There's being upset, right? And then there's being upset and then doing something crazy, right? So I think that their frustration and a lot of the stuff they're saying is legitimate. I don't know if you should go and take that step, right? I mean, you could be really upset with your spouse and be ticked off, and then maybe like, look, I'm going out for a drive because I can't be in this house right now. And there's another thing to like, hit them, right? One of those things, like the frustration is okay. The actions are, different.
Sure. I think so. I've talked to my dad, and he's kind of on the same side as why is it shut down? I mean, he's from like the west side of Wisconsin here, and over there they have like nothing.
What's the west side? Like La Crosse?
Like La Crosse, like Eau Claire. Eau Claire's a little more northern, but like La Crosse, Viroqua, Fond du Lac, I think is over there.
I don't know.
Definitely.
I
don't know my state geography. Right. You're really calling me out here.
All right.
But they've got like nothing going on over there. So to us, it makes somewhat sense. I mean, even in Milwaukee, there's relatively a lot of cases, but I mean, it's not like something that we deal with every day.
I mean,
but to them, there's even less. They're shut down. They're shut down because there's nothing else going on. So I get it from that perspective, but the reason there's not much going on there, I think, is because it's shut down. It's the whole idea of being like, I think I've seen a lot of people say that if we do the social distancing, if we do the flatten the curve measures correctly, in hindsight, people will say it was worthless, it was pointless, because it will have worked. Mm-hmm. So they're saying
you'd have to have the counterfactual, right? But now it looks like we are going to see a counterfactual from Sweden, right? Who has done some kind of a balanced model, right? And they're getting all kinds of credit.
I think balanced is giving them a lot of credit.
What do you mean? But they are doing social distancing, right? It's not like they're just saying business as usual, whatevs. All of the restaurants have like moved to everything's like 6 feet apart. Major concerts and public gatherings aren't allowed. Mm-hmm. I think like it's 100 or something that is the max. So it's not totally business as usual. And then obviously they have to segregate, at-risk people. So what if you were a cancer survivor, but you have a job, right? You probably have to stay home. So imagine that those people are probably getting some sort of recompense because you're not allowed to work anymore, just because you beat cancer, right? And now congratulations, you got to stay at home. That sucks, right? So I'm sure that it's not totally business as usual, but they're not completely shutting down the economy.
Yeah, I think their cases are spiking pretty hard too.
Well, yeah, but what happens when we start to relax the social distancing? Right. We're going to start to spike as well.
Well, that's the thing is, I think with the social distancing measure, the flatten the curve is the first part of things. And then once things are more under control, and like you were saying, it's baked into the cake a little more, we can then expand it. Even if it spikes, it's still not going to overwhelm the system.
Right.
So that's the issue that we can, I mean,
but we're going to have to go to a Sweden model soon.
Right. I mean,
because we cannot, you could tell me about the economic side, we cannot keep this going until the end of the year.
No, not the end of the year. But I think people are kind of jumping the gun too soon. I mean, it depends on what side of things you mean we can't keep going. I think that we could probably keep the same sort of quarantine, social distancing measures as we have in place now pretty reasonably through the end of May without really having too much long-term effects. The short-term effects for sure. Mm-hmm. And you will need a little more kind of stability from the congressional and the legislative side of the business. The big part that I'm worried about with the economic side of things is, and we were kind of talking about this in the chat the other day, is that it's the small and medium-sized businesses. Those are the businesses that employ 60 to 70% of the employees in this country, and we need them to at least exist after the fact. Yeah. They're not open right now, so they have no revenue streams, and so they have a couple issues there. Obviously, they need to pay their employees, which is kind of this whole small and medium-sized business loan thing. I guess just kind of give some background knowledge. I don't know all the steps because there's been so many things that have been put out there now, but they portioned a certain amount of loans to a certain amount of money to get put into the economic system for small and medium-sized businesses, because the kind of federal government themselves, they have a weird rule or kind of unspoken rule where they can't take losses. Obviously, these loans are going to be losses. So what they've done is they're having the banks put out these loans, and then they're buying 95% of those loans then from the banks. So because they're not buying 100% of them, it's still on the banks to do some underwriting. And then because they're buying them from the banks are the ones taking the losses, but then we're just refunding them once they do that. So the federal government still isn't taking a loss. It's kind of this weird accounting book sort of thing. But the issue with it is, because they're doing it this way, they have to do a specific dollar amount. And I think that's kind of an issue there. Inflation aside, I mean, we have bigger issues than inflation right now. They probably should have an unlimited amount of these loans, I would say, just so that we can at least keep these businesses functioning and active through whenever this takes. I think last Thursday was maybe 10 days after the loan system started, and they're already out of money. So,
yeah, I know that's a big problem to get that delivered. We don't. Well, normally unemployment would solve this, right? But we don't have unemployment's overwhelmed as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Which I think makes I think it makes a kind of a good point for kind of the left wing or kind of the more progressive side of the political spectrum here, is that it's not so much that they are right that we should have all these welfare programs, but we'd at least need to have a welfare system, a robust welfare system in place for when things like this happen. I mean, with the whole stimulus check, your Corona bucks or your Trump bucks, whatever you want to call them, if you filed your taxes and you have a direct deposit on file, you're good to go. But most of the people who need that money are ones who don't have a direct deposit on file, and getting your check is going to take so much longer because they have to kind of find these people. They don't have any sort of way to track them down. If we had that in place, things would be a lot easier. So I think it's making a good point to at least...
How many people don't have a direct deposit?
I don't know, but I know it's like a significant portion from what I understand. And I mean, even if it's not a ton of people, it's still the people who, if you don't have a direct deposit, you probably need that money more than most.
Could be, yeah probably.
So I know just kind of anecdotally from some people, I know that they're having a lot of issues with it when they've filed their taxes previously from a bank account direct deposit. That bank account is now closed. So now the IRS is trying to send that money to that closed bank account. They're not getting it. But because they have a direct deposit on file, they can't get the IRS to send them a check either. So there's like all these kind of unforeseen issues there.
Yeah.
And it's also
this is a once a lifetime thing. This is a once in a century virus, just like the 1918 Spanish flu. So, imagine if we would have created a system like post 1918, like it's somebody's having this conversation. We'd have those cool straw hats, that they had back then, right? We're having this conversation. I don't know how we're recording it either on some gramophone, right? They've got record players. We could have potentially, we could
done it like on a telegraph system. So the whole thing in Morse code.
That's right. Or just had somebody writing it down in shorthand, right? Sure. But anyways, think about the system that they would have had. It would have been so old that we couldn't have used it now. We would have had to update it. And then would have the people in the 1960s been like, oh, come on, dude. Like, was anyone even alive back then? Like, and they would have just forgotten, like it's a pandemic. You just, when it doesn't happen, you just forget. I think this is why Bill Gates is sitting there saying, we're not prepared for a pandemic. Look at his 2015 TED Talk, right? You can see, wow, it's prophetic. But it's easy to ignore when it's just been so long.
I mean, I think it has to do with, this is going to be maybe a hot take here. I think the pervasiveness of like business and profit margins has pervaded into our politics so much that it's creating a lot of these issues where, all the odds of it happening are so small that it's not worth doing. But it is worth doing because it's going to happen. It's a once in a century thing, which means that once per century, we're going to run into this issue. And if we're not prepared for it, then...
But when you say progressive too, couldn't you also say like that this is part of like the, an economic conservative idea too, that we should have this a way, for just in case.
I think you could make the argument. I don't think any economic conservative who identifies as such would agree with you.
Really, I mean, I distinguish economic conservative from economic libertarian.
Sure.
Right? The economic conservative would say, we shouldn't send too much of our steel factories overseas. We shouldn't send too much of our XYZ factories overseas because we need that knowledge here.
Sure.
Just in case the shit hits the fan. We have all the knowledge. If we've sent all, industry X somewhere and now we have to bring it here, we're just not going to have the knowledge base to do it. I mean, you have it written down in books, but everybody knows that all of this is in practice. You can't just learn this from books. You have to have people that have been doing it, know how to do it. And you have to have a significant amount of them because there's diversity of thought in the way that they do it. To me, that's an economic conservative argument. The libertarian argument is no, whatever. It's cheaper over there. You're allowed to just do what you want.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. I could see that then. Yeah, for sure.
So I do think though. So the economic conservative argument actually pairs with like kind of the Bernie bro argument. It does. You're right. I think that those two have some synergy, the progressive and the economic conservative.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, I think it's some Central European country, maybe Hungary.
Yeah.
There's a cool, I think I might have said this on a previous podcast.
Viktor Orban's
actually.
your favorite, right?
Maybe, I don't know his name of it, but they formed a coalition out of nowhere, out of like quote unquote nowhere, where there's like a right-wing nationalist group that kind of made a deal with the Green Party on the other side. Kind of the idea of where their thoughts align is on preserving the natural beauty of like the country, preserving like the nature and all that. So I think from that perspective, there is space for the progressive side of things to agree with the economic conservatives. You know, there is reason to have these in place because one, I mean, when shit like this does hit the fan, even though, you know, we live in like to think we live in as much of a meritocracy as we can currently put in place, there's still people who need support when this thing happens. So we do need a welfare state because meritocracy means you get what you deserve, but it also means you don't get what you don't deserve. So these people are getting laid off. These businesses are closing through really no fault of their own because the government's saying so. Because like, so then how does that work in a meritocratic system? You know?
Yeah. There was I was trying to pull up the guy's name, but no doubt there's a populist argument, and this the right and left wing populist. And Viktor Orban, as you mentioned, Hungary, right? So that's the president of Hungary. He's considered like, you know, this right wing. You know, if you listen to certain media, they call him fascist, and it's. But you do see a lot of this the populist left and populist right on the same page on a lot of things. You know, so one of the problems with that is it can allow demagogue dictatorships. You know, right now there's not as much as, you know, they've clamped down on a lot of it's hard to speak out against Viktor Orban right now. So that's one of the problems with populism. It gets too out of control. But the whole idea of the elites, the globalists, you know, versus the nationalists, like, that it's sometimes really hard to tell who's talking about this, whether the left or right winger, because, you know, it's really weird. And you do see a lot of these big interests of the establishment working against people, you know. So Cenk Uygur sounds a lot like some of the right wing populists. Yeah,
things are looking pretty good for the populists right now compared to the globalists, I'd say.
Oh yeah, in a big way. and it's really weird. I didn't realize that Mitch McConnell is married to a Chinese woman who is also whose connections to like extreme power in China.
Really?
Right? Yeah, I did not know this. Joe Biden has connections. Apparently, Hunter Biden, you've heard that, you know, he was on the director of Burisma, but he's also appointed to the director of board of some Chinese companies as well. So Biden looks to be corrupt. So, you know, Mitch McConnell didn't look very good in this particular expose either. But yeah, China is not our friend. And you know, the Chinese people, again, I'm talking about the Chinese government. The Chinese people are heirs to like an enormous, like a great legacy, and they deserve a better government. But it's weird how we're selling out the nation, you know, to
the nation of China, or nation?
No, to our own nation, to China's interests. I mean, basically, is Xi Jinping going to get? Are we going to adopt Xi Jinping's worldview? Because the more and more we do business with China, the more and more we let our own economics be dependent on them, the more and more we're going to have to adopt their worldview.
Right.
And that's selling out the American Constitution and values.
I mean, you saw like with the NBA.
Yeah, I know. That's a great example.
Feels like forever ago, but yeah.
I know. It really does. But yet, what do? But you have to push back. I mean, if you've been in sales, right? Somebody's like, oh my God. No, yeah, I'll take that, but I want to pay half the price. And you're like, well, if you want to pay half the price, then I can give you a different product because, I mean, this is a much more quality product. I mean, why didn't the NBA push back and say, fine, yeah, well, you cut us off, then show your own basketball.
Right.
Tell your own people that they don't get to watch the best in the world anymore because it is a better product. Do you think the Chinese people would have been happy? I don't think so. I mean, it's not just when your customer threatens you. Right, yes, that's a scary thing, but they're also losing something. If you do have the high quality product, they're hurting themselves if they want to ditch you.
Right. It's almost like it's the way we treat China is like treating like a seller's market. Whatever price they want to pay, we're just going to pay it for them just for the privilege of working with them.
Yes, I know. Right, and then they get it back. Of course, they're going to leverage that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and you know that's just weird. And then again, that kind of going to erode these democratic institutions. I'm telling you, we should decouple from China. I think that's actually a more
entirely.
Existential threat than coronavirus.
You want to decouple like entirely, like no more trade with China?
No, like as much as we can.
Well, how do you do that? Do you put tariffs in?
Yeah, you tariff. You bet.
I thought it was interesting. This is going to sound super outdated because this is no longer an issue really, at least currently. But back when the trade war thing was taking place, one of the biggest like left-wing like counterpoints to like the tariffs was saying like, oh, well, Trump's saying he's here to look out for you, but now he's put these tariffs in place and you're paying more. And I'm like, this is what most people want. Like, so much more people would be happy to pay for like an American product. Like, it just seems so out of touch to me that
you
like
would pay more, right? That's a libertarian argument, right? It's weird for if to have these all progressives get all crazy economic libertarian on you,
right? It's like, yes, that's what we want, correct?
Right. I mean, that's the point. And how much more are you going to pay? It may be 10% more. I don't think it's going to be 200% more. I mean, it would probably be more, but the fact is you're going to be creating jobs. You're going to boost.
Right. And more for now.
And employment. The one good thing that China is doing is everything they do is to keep people employed. I mean, their unemployment records are like 3%, 3.5%. Like they do a great job of keeping people employed. When you keep people employed, you'll be in good shape. If we bring this industry back, maybe you're paying more, but people are employed. That's a good economy.
Something that I've seen, it was more of a niche view before, but something that's more in the limelight now is, what do you think of I guess part of the huge stimulus package here, we'll start here. It's going to be a bit of a long topic here, but what do you think of the stimulus package itself, just in general? What are your thoughts?
I don't know, it's big. I think they had to do it. Right?
It's too big. You worry about inflation? Are they
I'm worried about
being
inflation.
too fast and loose with the money supply here?
God, yes, I'm very worried about inflation. But because the more and more you dump on there, the more and more you might inflate this. Yeah, so I am. I'm worried about that. I don't. I mean, yes, we had to do that. I don't. We can't afford more of these, though, or many more of these. I think some more coming. But what if we have to do this again in November or October? That's what I'm afraid of. Like, that's why it's so important to get antibody testing to understand how many people we can get back to work, because we could spike again in the fall, and we just can't have like 2 more months of this again and again. Like, we just can't do it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of a view a lot of people have here, and there's a kind of an economic view that I've been reading a little bit more about lately. It's kind of popped up, and you might have seen something called MMT, or modern monetary theory. Mm-hmm. So the idea being that if you print your own currency like the US does, it doesn't really matter if you run a deficit, because you can always print more money, which from an inflationary standpoint might kind of set up some alarms. But the idea is that really what drives inflation is not so much the money supply in and of itself, it's a money supply per goods available ratio. So if you have more money and less goods, then it's going to be inflation. If you're increasing goods and matches the increase in money, then there's going to be no inflation, because everything's still being proportionally cost the same. So the idea being that we can run deficits as a country as long as we keep a certain level of production, which has kind of led to the idea that this kind of opens up a lot of space for more progressive ideas that have been previously denounced as being, there's no way, we just don't have the money for it. Which
what if China then, right, if we put on tariffs and then in return they start selling off our debt, and now we can't get any more. We don't have any more bonds to sell. The market dries up.
The market wouldn't dry up, though. I think one of the big people who buy the American bonds are American citizens themselves. Have you seen the prices for bonds are through the floor right now because everybody's trying to buy them. Or I guess yields are through the floor, prices are up. So they work inverse. The yields are, there's such high demand right now for the American bonds, and there's such high demand across the world for American debt that even if China stopped buying it, we wouldn't really have too much of an issue. Like you were saying before, China
stop buying it, but actively trying to sell it.
That's fine too. It really wouldn't be too much of an issue, I don't think, because at the end of the day, there's such a demand for American debt because there's too big.
We're trusted,
right? Because there's too big of economies. There's us in China, and like you were saying earlier, China plays pretty loose with their monetary policies there, and they kind of just say like, oh well, what are debts really except just kind of a physical agreement? It's like, so I think because the U.S. debt and the U.S. dollar is so trusted, there's really no risk that ever going away across all the countries. Countries do business in the American dollar because they know that they can go to America and exchange it for their currency. You don't know that same thing with China.
Right. Yeah.
So with that,
so their economics, isn't their dollar very much dependent on ours?
The yuan.
Yeah.
It's in the way they say it isn't, but they match so they have like a pegged rate currency, which I'm not super familiar on my currency kind of matching styles. But what they do is they take it's like a floating kind of match, and then they kind of let it float between 2 points, and they adjust it between there as it goes on. But if we do like the big thing that changes how much the dollar is worth is like the federal funds rate. So that's like the interest rate they charge on banks to hold the money overnight. And they just cut that to zero. And then you'll see, because the Federal Reserve in America, in a sense, acts as like the world's Federal Reserve or the world's central bank. Once they do that, you'll see all these other countries adjust their rates like in lockstep based on that. Okay. So they're not pegged it to the US dollar, but they're physically matching it in the way they have their policy.
Right.
So they're going to say like, oh no, we just made this decision on our own for the exact same, interest rate change that you guys did.
And weren't they getting loans too from the World Bank under like developing country status? Right. That's mostly, meant for places like Botswana and Ivory Coast that, actually really need these things, and China was still getting them.
There's this big thing in China too. It's like the shadow banking system where, just to kind of be brief because there's a lot to unpack there. But the federal government implicitly backs any local or municipality or locality's debt they issue. So what the localities and municipalities have been doing is setting up like pass-through organizations. So like the Chinese federal government won't be too happy if you're doing debt for funding a new city hall, or if you're doing debt to fund I don't know what's a good example, like increasing like delivery business in the city, because it's not something that like a government should be doing as far as they're concerned. So what the municipalities are doing is setting up like pass-through organizations, having them take out these debts, have the municipality back those organizations, then have the government back their debt based on that. So these municipalities are issuing their own debt for these projects that are more commercial than, I guess, cultural or societal, which China's starting to crack down on, but that's caused a huge issue with like their the reliability of their debt, because it's not the Chinese government issuing it, it's just these independent agencies.
Interesting.
So there's a lot.
But can't they also get like listed on certain exchanges without the same reporting functions too that we have to, like when you have to submit quarterly reports and all this to the SEC? But in China, it's actually state treason to like give these numbers, so then we just allow them to be on these exchanges without the same reporting requirements as American companies.
Well, they're not on our exchanges; they're on their own exchanges. So most developed countries have their own exchanges. Okay, there's like an Iranian exchange, there's a Chinese exchange, which we can see like their indexes like goes up and down. But like you said, they don't really give a lot of their information out, so there's more risk involved with being in those exchanges because you don't really. I mean, there was what was it? It was Luckin Coffee. Did you see that?
No, huh?
Luckin Coffee. I can look it up here real quick. It was this Chinese-based coffee company, and then it just came out that for the last year, was it? I'm just reading a headline here, but I think it was like $2.5 billion in their sales. They came out and said it was completely forged.
Yeah, I've heard more and more of this, that their GDP numbers could be inflated as high as 20%. Is that true?
China's?
Yeah.
I mean, it has to do with like the way they're doing their accounting. Is
that Luckin Coffee?
That is Luckin Coffee.
Oh, yeah, looks like the American thing, like chugging along to
83% drop. But I mean, it has to do with the way they account for their GDP. I mean, there's a lot, I guess, to unpack there as well. To keep using that phrase over and over again, but there's different measures of it. You can measure like EBITDA for you can use that to apply to like a whole country. You can do something where you can match different indexes like the consumer price index, the CPI, versus like there's other indexes to like match goods and like sales there. So it's a hard number to totally calculate. And because of that, if you're not upfront with the way you're calculating it, we're probably going to assume you're taking all the liberties you can to boost those numbers up. So yes, it could be, but we don't know for sure because it's the same thing with kind of like how there's their manufacturing index, the way they can like boost it, with the way people were thinking the way they were trying to kind of boost it in the wake of everything shutting down was they were just having like coal factories and kept burning coal and kept running electricity for all these factories that were empty, because electricity usage by factories is one of the main factors in that. So if you know how the index works, you can game the system to boost the index numbers, even if you're not really matching the spirit of what the index is trying to say. Same thing with the GDP, really.
Wow. Okay.
But I guess going all the way back to what I was talking about, the modern monetary theory, kind of being able to fund more of these social programs, something that I've seen stated more, and I think is probably going to be more of an issue in the next couple of years here, is the idea of a federal fund or a federal job guarantee. So it's like
what is that?
It's the idea. I mean, the mandate of the Federal Reserve is to adjust interest rates such that we can minimize unemployment. It doesn't say put unemployment to zero because we don't know if that's possible, but at least minimize it. So the idea being the federal government should at least have the ability to employ any individual looking for a job in, any sort of menial capacity, any sort of job that does need to get done, and you can pay them probably the federal minimum wage, but you can still employ everyone. So it'll still allow people to continue to get a paycheck over time. And even if that doesn't necessarily...
I could hire somebody and not have to pay if I'm a business owner, I could hire somebody there and I don't have to pay the wage?
So they would... No, you would have to pay them if you hired them, but the federal government will hire people to do...
But who's going to run that? Like all the feds? Is it going to be like a government project?
Sure, why not? I mean, we have other government projects that are probably more involved than that. I mean... There's always work that needs to be done. We need people to clean stuff up. We need more. We need more sanitation. We need stuff.
Don't worry about federal jobs guarantee, and then so you put it in there. You put it at the minimum wage or something. Okay, fine. But then they say, well, we need. There's all these people that are in there. We need to raise that, and then you raise this. This minimum guarantee to where it can outcompete regular private businesses. Because you jack up, if you jack up the wages high enough, everyone would want to work on those kind of jobs. If you guarantee $50 an hour, for example, right? So what's that, about $100,000 a year? Then, no one would want to work at a private industry. Those jobs would be coveted. So you would always make sure that you would have to make sure that they were limited.
Right. You can match it to the federal minimum wage. I mean, at that point, if you boost the minimum wage, then all these other companies have to boost theirs too.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
But if you boosted the minimum wage, though, that would favor these versus private jobs. That's the problem.
What do you mean?
Right. So you have the minimum wage X. Right now, X plus 2. Then now, it's just for the federal government. Boom. We just increase all these minimum wage jobs of all the federally guaranteed jobs. But now, individual companies are now that they bear more of a burden. Right.
Right. But people making more money at federal minimum wage level is going to have them have more disposable income to then spend.
But wouldn't this shunt jobs from private industry towards this federally guaranteed?
I mean, it would make them competitive, I think, but it's not going to. So the argument is, I think what the argument you're making is that the revenue stream is going to be the same for these private companies. So they're going to have to pay their wage, which is going to take up a bigger chunk of their pie. But if minimum wage is rising, then I'm sure it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but if people are making more, they're spending more as well. People don't make more money and then just save that money. That's just not the way people work. So they're going to be spending more, and assuming you are an active participant in the market and have a revenue stream is going to go up as well.
Right. I don't know. Maybe. It depends on... I guess it just would depend on whether you trust more. And I guess I tend to trust private businesses more than I do the government, but obviously I know that other people think differently.
Right. I mean, it's different branches of the government are trusted differently too.
Yeah. So. I know some have done better. Like NASA did well, with the space program and some stuff. But others, post office does okay. But I just don't think they innovate well. Government programs never innovate well.
Well, that's kind of, I don't know if I brought this up last time, but it's a point that governments are meant to innovate. They're meant to provide a social good. Companies are meant to innovate, so they have to kind of work together. They're both two sides of the same coin. If companies just work on profit, just work on innovation, you're not going to have park benches. You're not going to have as much nice things, nice parks, because parks aren't profitable. We do need a government to take control of some aspects of things to provide a non-profitable social good that we all enjoy. At the same time, we need business to look for a profitable solution to push things forward and progress them in that way. So it's about finding a balance for sure. And federal jobs guarantee, I think it's just I think it's just a good way to have some sort of just employment base there. I mean, obviously, if there's enough drama with the federal minimum wage, I don't think that they're going to be just. It's an option. I guess it's an option to run into the scenario you're talking with them jacking it to 50, but I don't think it's a very likely
the minimum
one.
Wage thing is tough too, because really minimum wage is here. It's to have a minimum wage. I wonder too. I distrust minimum wages in some ways. I also distrust drug laws. And one of the reasons I do, I guess, for the origin of drug laws were racist, right? It was cocaine was illegal for black people, not white people, right? So, and then it became illegal for all. But the idea was, to stop, they seen these lower qualities was perceived African Americans would be worse than cocaine. So But the entire anti-drug industry then, I think, oh wow, it was rooted in racism. But so is the minimum wage. The minimum wage was there to because there was a lot of black people that would work for less. Mm-hmm. And when you had a minimum wage, then it would stop. There was a lot of races that wanted a minimum wage because it would stop black people from out competing them working for less. And so I distrust the idea of a minimum wage because it really comes out of racism. And, it just seems like to me.
So do you think it's better to not have one?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I do. I actually think it's better not to have one because workers will compete. I mean, even Henry Ford, right? Now granted, he's, I just brought up racism. Now I'm talking about anti-Semite, but still the one portion that he said is the rule for an industrialist is to make the best product possible at the lowest cost possible, paying the highest wages possible. Right, to make your workers loyal. The idea was you will want to work at Ford. There's going to be a waiting list to get in at Ford. No one's ever going to want to quit at Ford. You're going to get the best protections out of your workers. You pay well.
I mean, that would work if you have mobility of potential workers, though. If you're stuck in some part of the city and there's really no other job for you than fast food jobs, then they're not going to be increasing their wage after the minimum wage goes away. I'll tell you that much.
Okay, but then you have more people unemployment. I mean,
there's opportunity costs for finding different jobs. If you get rid of the minimum wage, then certainly some companies are going to have more freedom there, but you don't have the ability to access those companies. Right. You can't say like, oh, Ford's hiring over in Wyoming. You can't just pick up and just start there tomorrow.
You could. I mean, you might be able to save up and do that. We wouldn't have this thriving, market of, guest workers that come over and essentially pick all the vines in California, right? These are almost always illegals. They're, and they'll work for a lot less than minimum wage, right? And these people, I know a neurosurgeon that came out of this, in the 70s, and he was featured in an article in a newspaper, and he talks about we were happy, we didn't have much, we were poor, but we were in good health. The whole family was together. He had a good childhood, even though they didn't have much means, but they were saving up money to bring more people from Mexico and so on and so forth. They were building a life. And obviously it's that generation. You have to look at solutions in that way generationally. So although his parents never became rich, he did. Mm-hmm. That generationally, when you can learn and have that work and, save a little bit, get going, and just kind of move on up. I mean, if you look at what are poor, the people that are considered even like lower middle class, have more than the upper middle class in 1910. I mean, because technology, refrigerators, cars, all of that stuff, TVs, no one had that shit. I mean, so if you look at it generationally, you actually see this up. And I feel like that's a better way to look at it. So I guess I don't
that's
like minimum wages for that reason.
I don't see the bit of the connection there. Like, if you're saying get rid of the minimum wage, are you saying that wages are going to go up then?
What's that?
Are you saying wages are going to go up if you get rid of the minimum wage?
Well, especially if you do this nationwide. I mean, the people that are going to take the lowest jobs are the ones that are the most poor, right? So they're this is why.
But that's who minimum wage is supposed to benefit. It's to benefit the most poor. Right, it's not to benefit the average upper middle to middle class.
Right, but does it? Right, because who are you going to hire? That it seems like the same. Who's competing for the minimum wage job, and you have somebody that's, that doesn't have a lot of work skill versus a teen. Somebody who really needs that job that doesn't have much money, or a teenager son of somebody who's in the upper middle class. They're competing in the same market. They shouldn't be.
So you're saying that people who are poor should have access to apply for jobs and ask to get paid less to make them more competitive?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know, Brian. Sounds like a slippery slope to me.
I mean, you get that one of the problems too is that when people don't have jobs, the opium crisis, I think, is directly linked to loss.
We didn't
of jobs.
have an unemployment problem per se. I mean, we had record low unemployment before all this started. It's not like we had
automation took a ton of jobs from the black community, right? The people working in muffler shops, people working in factory X that were low skilled, Like, and those jobs went away. That is going to destroy the family dynamics, destroy the middle class. Like that hurts. I mean, Ohio's that drug problem in Ohio and the Rust Belt, like that's got to be correlated with the loss of jobs.
I think it's a different topic altogether.
Really?
I mean, it's a pretty different topic. There is the automation side of things.
But I mean, but either way, like the idea is you want so automation. Yeah, fine, it does take it, but still, you want. I'd say somebody working for less than minimum wage is actually going to be healthier and happier than somebody who's on welfare. I know.
Food for thought, I guess.
It is food for thought. It's weird. I'm not saying that I would risk my life on this. Just it's a sense I get.
Sure. My last topic here I have off the top of my head is a lot of people have been kind of very upset with like airlines giving like bailouts and stuff. There's been this huge thing with all these companies who've been doing stock buybacks and giving like executive like bonuses and all that sort of thing. Like they should have like saved up that money, and they should have had this money in reserve for like when this sort of stuff happens. And like I get the sentiment, I do, and it seems unfair that they would like do all this extra stuff but then not have the money. But the idea that they would have money sitting around if they hadn't done it, I think is pretty disingenuous. Like if you're a company and you have a couple options, and say you use your money to do stock buybacks or use your money to give the boss a bonus. If those weren't what you were going to do, you're going to spend them elsewhere. You're going to put like a capital expenditure. You're going to put them into other resources. It's not like in lieu of not doing these certain purchases, not doing these certain things, you're going to have all this extra money laying around, which I think is a point that people either willingly or just naively are missing here. There's been like a viral clip of like, I think this guy's name is Chamath something or other. He runs a hedge fund out of the Silicon Valley area, I'm pretty sure. And there was this interview at on CNBC where they asked him like, "Oh, well, what do you want to do? Let's just have these airlines go bankrupt." And he's like, "Yes." And like everybody's kind of rooting him on for this. But the idea, like, we can say that yes, like going bankrupt is going to hurt the executives, is going to hurt the stockholders and the stakeholders. But if you think that by a big company like that going bankrupt, that the workers, that the people who you're trying to like protect or trying to have less harm than the fat cats, if you will, they're going to be harmed just as hard by this, if not more. Sure. Like if you work for a company that goes bankrupt like that and your entire industry goes bankrupt, your wages are going to be way down. You're going to be making way less money. Like a bailout for a company isn't just a bailout for the executives and the stockholders. True. It's a bailout for the workers who work for them too.
Although it just depends on the way you look at it, right? Because isn't a lot of what are we calling them? The kind of the loans or the package, this kind of recovery package is also then aren't Trump's hotels and all of this like exempt from it? They right. Okay. So
what's the divestment clause? I think is the big thing there.
But what they're saying is like, but doesn't that absolutely screw the workers that just happen to work for him?
If he hadn't continued to maintain control of them, they would probably be part of the deal. But since he still maintains control of them as like part of a business, they're not going to. You can't. I think it'd be pretty unethical to have a stimulus package that then directly benefits someone who is part of that stimulus package making process.
Right. Well, what about like are there other people in the government that are also subject to this that might also be business owners like Senator X or Congressman X?
If they are part of businesses, they're probably divested the same way, I'd imagine.
Okay.
So
I don't know.
I remember it was a big deal that like Trump wouldn't divest himself from them because like you're definitely supposed to because he maintains control of these companies even though he's the president when all previous like presidents have relinquished control of them, at least for the time being while they're president. Because
interesting. Okay.
Obviously, if you're in charge, you can make some pretty beneficial decisions for your companies, especially if you own them while you're doing it.
Okay. So maybe that is a good reason to do that.
Right.
But yes, I do think that you can't tie you have to think of the workers for the company too, right? I mean, the whole idea of the stock buyback, and I think during some of like the tax cuts and people were like doing stock buybacks, and I guess usually you do a stock buyback when your company, you feel like your company's undervalued, right? You don't just buy back your stock just to jack up the price. You'd only buy back your stock when you feel like the stock has been sold off, and you're getting a bargain on it.
Typically, there's some companies who've been pretty blatant about buying back their stock in an effort to just boost their company's valuation. But But I think for the most part, you're right there. That is the general consensus is you'd only do that when you either want to increase, value per shareholder as doing like a gift to them, which, I mean, if you buy stocks, is going to increase the value.
Right.
Or just to buy it back to one, take more control of the company back, or just because you think it's underpriced and you can get a better deal for it later.
Yeah, it's underpriced, and that you can do that because you're going to issue some more stock later for some capital boom. Project
or just sell the stock that you have back again. If you if you think it's undervalued, you can buy it at 100 and say in a year from now, it goes to 150, and you can just sell it back.
Playing the market. Yeah, exactly. So, that I think that to that extent is probably okay, but. I get where people are coming from, that they get pissed off at stock buybacks.
Right.
And this and that.
Because at the end of the day, it really only benefits, the elites.
Right. Well, I think is the more and more employment you have, you'll be doing good. And you do want, when you see stagnating wages, this is one of the things where I do think that, again, those populists on the left and right have some sense of bring these companies back, let wages go up a little bit. Because yes, I mean, companies' balance sheet and stocks are going well, but if you were invested in the market and you had enough, man, you had a great 10-year run. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't and you were just on the work, you saw stagnating wages, and that's tough. So I do think, we should need more times to bring stuff back. Yes, wages will go up. Yes, things will cost more, but everybody gets part of the pie. If everybody's going up at the same rate, I think that's income inequality doesn't matter as much because everybody's gaining.
Right.
And I think you have a lot less yelling about income inequality.
Sure. I just kind of spitballing here. What you could potentially do is you could tie some sort of ratio where whatever percentage buybacks you do, you also have to increase your bottom line wages by the same sort of percentage or by a relative percentage. So in a sense, you're benefiting the executives, you're benefiting the stakeholders, and you're also benefiting the bottom line there.
Right. But artificially doing, I mean, I just you
don't need to, but you don't need to do stock buybacks. So you don't need to do it.
Right.
But if you do, you should be the idea being maybe you can pass the benefits of the profitability or the excess of the company along to at least
fiduciary responsibility needs to be looked at in a different way, right? I mean, these people have an obligation to their shareholders, right? So you might feel like, I have an obligation to buy back stock because it's so undervalued right now. But at the same time, you have an obligation to your country too. And I think that the American companies and this kind of thing need to be thinking more about, or in addition to the value for shareholders, is the value to America. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, it's because the American dollar is trusted. This is one of the reasons that it's better than the one and all of that. So the more and more we come entangled with, I don't know, the Chinese, which are doing some weird stuff, right? I mean, they're the evidence of organ harvesting is overwhelming over there. I mean, they're doing some shit that some of their doctors that blew the whistle on this are missing. The U.S. hasn't shot any of their doctors for blowing whistles on things
you know of.
The worst we've seen in the U.S. is there have been a few doctors that are like, there's no masks at Hospital X. We're out of this. We're out of that. And they're like, shut up. And they fired them.
And the military captain, too.
Yeah, right. Now, he went outside the chain of command. It's a little bit different than the military.
Sure.
But it does seem weird that some doctors yelling about this and that, and then they fire them because, again, they don't want to look bad. But, okay, firing somebody is totally different than locking them in the gulag.
True.
I mean, that's what China's doing. How much do we want to do this? And back to the NBA's thing. Yes, okay, well, what about entertaining these 500 million eyeballs over there? Okay, well, remember too, we did the Olympic Games in 1936, sent people over and entertain Hitler. Let's be looking at this is that something you really want to do? And say that your fiduciary responsibility is not only, like you said, economic and fair, but it also is to the values of the country.
Right. There's stockholders and there's stakeholders. Stockholders are the one that own part of the company. Stakeholders are the ones that depend on the company for what they have. So I think it's good to benefit both of them, at least there. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps things up for me.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's do a one-on-one next time. That'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll do one. We'll try to get one. Well, I don't think this coronavirus thing is going to go away anytime soon. So,
I know.
All right, though.
All right. Take care.